Good morning to everyone. My name is Gordon Sisk, and I am a retired educator from Knoxville, Tennessee. And I am here to present the story of a gentleman whose name is Roderick Edmonds. This is a man whose story was not told, and when I saw the invitation to the workshop, I thought this guy's perfect. This is exactly who they're looking for. So I sent him my request. I had heard the story of this. This was just a simple man. He was placed in a position of authority, and yet he put the lives of others above himself. And then when he did these things, he never told anybody else. And he had long since passed away when his son discovered what had gone on. And one of the things that I love about this, and that I think is wonderful about this presentation, is that as I was growing up, we learned history through presidents and generals. It was the big guys. We didn't hear much about the little people down at the end of the line. And there were very few of those kinds of things. And so I really like the fact that we have shifted in history to hearing the stories from the little people, hearing what that guy way down on the end of the line says. When I taught about the Civil War, I used Company H and soldiering, stories of a Union Confederate soldier way down at the end of the line. Weren't important at all, but able to make a huge difference in what they did. And so in looking at this, I think one of the things we need to look at is what a hero is. You know, there's a lot of definitions of a hero. Somebody who was killed in battle, somebody that risked their lives to save other people. But if you ask a veteran, somebody who was in war, how he would describe a hero, I have never heard a veteran, and I've spoken to many, who didn't say, "I'm no hero. Those guys that didn't come back were the heroes." The guys that didn't make it home. And if you ever want to really get some awesome stories of that, check out the Medal of Honor Museum or the Medal of Honor Character Development Program with some awesome things. And we'll touch back on that in a little bit. Now, Edmund Roddie was born in Knoxville, Tennessee in 1919. And when he was working his way through the Depression, not a lot of jobs out there, and so he decided to enlist in the military. And he was in the 442nd Regiment, 106th Infantry Division in the headquarters company, and he rose to the rank of Master Sgt. And so he was in charge of training folks. Now, the discovery of what happened was from his son, Chris, who is a pastor here in Maryville, right next to Knoxville. And it was actually his daughter's class assignment at Maryville College that prompted these things. And she had an assignment in class and said something about her grandfather having been at war, and she knew or had heard about some diaries that he had written. And so she came home, was talking to her dad, and they went to see his mother as Edmund had died in 1985, so he had been gone quite a while, and so got those diaries and started reading those, and inside that he found a whole bunch of names, a whole bunch of different people listed in there, and almost every one of those names looked to be someone Jewish. So got curious about what was going on. He was deployed to the front in early December 1944 in the Ardennes. There had not been anything going on there for a while, and so everybody kind of joked about how it was, easy duty. And then things changed quite a bit on December 16th when the Germans launched their counteroffensive, what we now refer to as the Battle of the Bulge. And so he get caught up in the middle of that. His unit was eventually surrounded and forced to surrender. They were marched for 4 days off to a stalag, no food or water when they got there. They were placed about 200 and some to a barracks. They also divided all the Jewish soldiers, or at least the ones that admitted to being that, because they had been told ahead of time that they needed to throw away their dog tags because they had an H for Hebrew on there. Well, they stay there for a little while, and then they are moved to another barracks at what's called Stalag IX. And Roddie is the ranking non-commissioned officer. They moved the officers to a different place. The privates and all were sent to a different stalag, and these were non-coms in this, and he was the ranking officer. They were separated in the barracks by rank and by the branch of service. They were fed a loaf of bread that at first they had to divide among 5 soldiers, and later on was as many as 10. And so when they divided that bread, it was a really thin slice, and what they tasted most of was sawdust, because that's what the Nazis would do, is use sawdust in that so they could make the bread go farther. Almost everybody lost a tremendous amount of weight. One soldier was talking about had weighed 180, and over the 100 days they were incarcerated, lost 60 pounds. They were not getting much to eat. It was really difficult. Well, at one point then, the officers in charge of the Stalag, the Nazis, told the soldiers there that they needed to separate all the Jewish soldiers, that they needed to, because every morning they reported for a roll call out front, and so at the roll call, they were told the next morning that only the Jewish soldiers were report for roll call. All the others were to stay in the barracks. Now, because they had seen what was going on, because by this time the Russian soldiers had liberated some of the camps, so they were aware of what was going on. So Roddie, being the ranking soldier there, he got with the other leaders of each of the barracks and said, in the morning, we will not send out the Jewish soldiers. We will all report just like we have been. We will not allow them to separate those soldiers from us. We will all stand together. And there were a number of soldiers who had been wounded or who were very sickly, who often did not report and stayed in the barracks. He said, I want everyone out of the barracks, everyone to come out. And so the next morning they did that. The German officers had said that anybody was helping the Jews or trying to hide them or anything, they would be shot along with the Jews, suffer the same thing. Now, in this camp, Stalag IX, there were 9A, there were 1,292 American soldiers. And so he's trying to get these soldiers to report. Well, Roddie told her, we're all going to report. So they do that. So on January 27th, 1945, at 0600, everyone reports. They're all out there lined up. The commander of the prisoner of war camp, a Major Siegelman, came up to Roddie and said, I know everybody here is not Jewish. I told you just the Jewish soldiers were to report. And he looked him right in the eye and said, we are all Jews here. And the major was furious because he knew that wasn't true. And he actually pulled out his Luger, put it at Roddie's forehead, and said, if you don't do like I'm telling you, I will shoot you dead where you stand. And Roddie replied with an incredible thing. He said, maybe you can shoot me, but you'll have to kill all of us because we know who you are, and you will be tried for war crimes when we win this war, and you will pay. And the major was not very happy, realized that was probably true, got really mad, stuck his Luger back in his holster, and turned around and left. So at that point, they didn't get the Jewish soldiers. Now, it wasn't long until the Allied advance reached the camp, and the Germans attempted to march everyone out of the camp, what often became known as death marches. And Roddie told everybody else, he said, nope, we're not going. He said, when they get us all out there, as soon as they look the other way, everybody run back to the barracks. Get back in the barracks. We're staying here. We're not going. And every time the Germans would get them out, they'd run back to the barracks again. And they kept doing that until finally the Germans got frustrated and went, it's your camp. Heck with it. The Germans marched out. And so the soldiers were liberated. Well, the way that all of this was learned, you will see in a video that was made by the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous. And this was something that they got together with Chris and a number of those Jewish soldiers that Roddy Edmonds saved were a part of making this happen. And so there was actually a video made. And so at this point, I would like for you to watch that video. It's about a 15-minute video, and there are lesson plans that were made by the Jewish Foundation. There's also a watching guide that goes with the video, so you will be able to download those materials and be able to use those while you're watching the video. It's an excellent thing for you to show in class.
My father passed away in August of 1985. I was 26 years old. You know, my father, he never really talked about his experiences in World War II or his time as a prisoner of war. He would say, "Son, there's some things I'd rather not talk about." While my father was a prisoner of war, he kept a diary. Late one night after reading his diary, I Googled his name and rank, and the first link that came up was an article in the New York Times.
I was being interviewed by the New York Times in 2008. All of a sudden, I remembered that there was a Master Sgt. Roddie Edmonds who saved my life when he defied the Germans and POW camp. That's all I said.
In the middle of that article, Lester mentions the bravery and courage of his Master Sgt. Roddie Edmonds. And I said, I got to find out what really happened to my dad during his POW experience.
I was born in the Bronx on August 8, 1923.
January 27, 1924.
I was born in Cleveland on April 24, 1924.
June 17, 1925, in Brooklyn, New York. I got the draft notice shortly after I turned 18, and I reported in for the draft exam, and they found me totally acceptable. I was breathing.
I was 18 years old. I was assigned as a combat medic to care for the wounded soldiers on the battlefield.
I was in headquarters company of the 422nd Infantry Regiment of the 106th Division. And that's where I met Les Tanner.
And I was Sergeant Lester Tannenbaum of the headquarters company. And Roddie Edmonds was the Master Sergeant. Roddie grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee. He probably never met a Jew in Tennessee when he went into the Army.
My dog tag had the information on it, my name and my serial number, and the letter H for Hebrew, so that if they found our bodies, they would know how to bury us.
One of the things we were told that if we were captured, we should destroy our dog tags.
Because being a Jew in that circumstance, we didn't know what our future was.
And off we went to the front. We went over as replacements for filling up the slots that had been opened by casualties. It was December, it was snowy, it was the coldest winter in 50 years.
We replaced the 2nd Division on the front, right in the Siegfried line, on the German side of the border.
We were very vulnerable.
The men had come and were told that this was a quiet sector. And when they got here, just 6 days after they got here, the war came to them.
The first day of the attack was December 16th.
I awakened and heard shell fire.
St. Vith was being attacked. That's our division headquarters 10 miles in back of us.
We were there when the Germans broke through with the Battle of the Bulge, and they broke through in force.
They broke through north of us and south of us.
We were completely surrounded, and we knew we were cut off.
Our position was untenable, and we finally decided to make a break for it. And we are cut off and surrounded by columns of German tanks, guns, troops.
Captain Forster said, "It's hopeless."
I'm reading from my father's diary that he kept. It was a hopeless cause in our case. When Captain Foster surrendered us, he did a very wise thing. Our rifles were no good against tanks and 88 fire.
And out we came to become part of what was the largest collection of captured GIs in World War II, from the 106th, from the 28th, and others. We began to start our march to we didn't know where.
There was a concern that the Germans would just shoot us up. When you're in brutal hands, like the Germans were, you're scared as hell.
I particularly was concerned because my name was obviously Jewish.
And then we got to the railhead, Gerolstein.
They loaded us on boxcars.
We were packed like sardines in that boxcar. No food or water on the 4-day trip to Bad Orb.
So the boxcars we were in turned out to be exactly the same cars that were taking the Jews to concentration camps.
And we went further into Germany.
Boarded train, Thursday, 21 December 44. Arrived Stalag IX-B, Bad Orb, Monday, 25 December 44. Registered Tuesday, 26 December 44.
We had to register. Name, rank, serial number.
But then they started asking questions about your religion.
The Germans segregated the Jewish POWs.
And we were assigned to the Jewish barracks.
Special barracks surrounded by barbed wire within the prison. We were in a prison within the prison. The order came down one day that the non-commissioned officers were getting on trucks and were being taken to another camp.
They took all the sergeants and corporals, all the non-commissioned officers, whether they were Jewish or not.
And luckily I am taken out of that isolated place at Bad Orb, and the next thing I know, I'm on a train going to Ziegenhain.
The Jewish POWs who had been left behind were shipped to a slave labor camp.
All of them later were sent to Berger, and many of them died there.
Arrived Stalag IX-A, Friday, 26 January 45. I'm walking along Main Street of Stalag IX-A, Ziegenhain. People are living here, even today. It's really hard to imagine that these barracks still stand almost intact the way that they were when Dad and his men were here.
British were there, French were there, Russians were there, and now we were coming in to occupy a quadrant of that whole thing.
There were about 1,200 American prisoners. Of the 1,200, I would estimate maybe 200 were Jewish.
In Ziegenhain, in my barracks, Lester was in it, Paul was in it, Roddie was in it.
So there's about 240 men in the barracks. You were given one thin blanket. That was all you had.
You went to bed hungry, you got up hungry, you were hungry forever.
Dinner was a piece of bread. We had 10 men sharing one loaf of ersatz bread. So it was probably half flour and half sawdust.
I lost 60 pounds in 3 months. It was January 27, 1945, when the Germans announced that all Jewish American prisoners would fall out the following morning. Just them. Anyone who didn't fall out would be shot. Same thing that they had said at Bad Orb. Roddie, for the first time in his experience, was in complete command. There was no one there to give him orders. It was his decision. He said, we're not going to do that. Everyone is going to fall out just as we do every morning. That following morning, Roddie is standing at the head of formation, and I was standing by his side.
I was there, the German was there, and Lester was there. So I heard every word that the commandant said.
Major Siegmann comes up to Roddie, and he says, you can't all be Jews. And Roddie said, we are all Jews.
That famous line, we're all Jews here, that will live in Jewish history.
Takes out his Luger and puts it next to Roddie's forehead, and he says, you will order the Jews to step forward, or I will shoot you right now. And Roddie said to him, "Major, you can shoot me, you can shoot all of us, but we know who you are. And this war is almost over, and you'll be a war criminal." And with that, the major lowered his Luger, about-faced, went back to his headquarters.
We were able to track the war pretty closely, even as we were POWs. So we knew we were within days of being liberated, hopefully.
The German commanders informed Roddie that they were going to evacuate the camp.
They don't want to be around when the Americans come.
And under Roddie's leadership, we refused. And that's why I'm here to tell you about the story today.
Roddie said, "We're just too weak to go on a long march.
We were in such lousy shape. The chances of coming out of that alive are not good.
Nobody marches out of camp. You break ranks and you run back into the barracks. And you keep doing that all day."
The day dawns, and in come the Germans. House, house!
Rouse, getting up, going back and forth.
We can see the British are moving out. Everybody else is moving out. We're still standing there. Finally, they give up, the Germans.
The German officers came up to Roddie and said, "Okay, camp is yours." And they marched out. We were left alone in the camp.
It gets very quiet. So now I climb up, a few of us climb up on the roof of our barracks, and then we see 2 lines of tanks.
We were liberated on March 30th by an American armored group.
The 6th Armored Division, as it turns out.
They were amazed to see these American soldiers, thin, hungry. It was such a happy day.
We were liberated on March 30th, which was the 2nd day of Passover.
And every time I ran a Seder, I would make this point because it was the date of my freedom.
I've made new friends and lost some. I don't know whether all my boys are alive or not, but I pray that they are. It all seems sort of a bad dream.
Well, they took us to Camp Lucky Strike, and I lost track of Roddie, and I never saw him again after that day, but it was never out of my mind. I have to tell you, that experience and Roddie was a defining experience in my life.
Roddie was incredible. He never really got his recognition, except among us.
We were very lucky to have him with us.
That such people can exist gives you hope, maybe, for humanity.
We stood there, we were the witnesses. We were the witnesses.
I've been following the footsteps of my father, and it's led me here. The lives of 200 Jewish men were forever changed right here.
It wasn't only my life, our lives multiplied. I have 4 children, I have 6 grandchildren, I have 2 great-grandchildren. So how would I have 18 people that wouldn't be here without him? Multiply that by 200, and you can see how important that decision has been.
That's the biggest joy for me, is to see the real people, the lives that have been touched and changed.
Roddie could no more have turned over any of his men to the Nazis than he could stop breathing. He just couldn't do it. A righteous man.
if you could watch that video and not get a little tear in your eye or a goosebump, I don't know what to say about you. It is so incredible and powerful, that story, and yet it was a story that was not told. That Roddie Edmonds went, nah, we're just going about our business. You know, he didn't tell his wife, he didn't tell his children. Nobody knew about that. And so it wasn't until they started digging in this, and one of the things noticed, you know, was some of those pages missing out of the diaries, because he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want any recognition for that. Now, since all of this has come to light, Roddie has been honored on the Yad Vashem in Israel as one of the righteous. He is one of only 5 Americans to be so honored, and the only U.S. soldier to be honored for saving Jews during World War II. In January of 2016, he received an award from President Obama on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, where they did that. And the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles has awarded him a Medal of Valor. He has also since been recommended for a Medal of Honor. And, of course, all the things going on in Washington these days, that hasn't been one of the priorities. But from what his son Chris said, that very possibly could get through this year. That's something that's supposed to be on the agenda somewhere. So very possibly he will be acknowledged with a Medal of Honor, which is just an incredible thing. His son Chris started an organization called Roddie's Code, and of course you can log on to Roddie's Code. There's some great things there. There is a longer video that Chris can bring out and show to groups and other organizations. Just incredible materials. And then, of course, the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous has unbelievable materials. There's also a number of links in that study guide that will give you wonderful places to go for additional things. And, of course, all of this came to be because Chris's daughter came to him with an assignment, and they started looking, and they made those friends that you know had served with his father. And so I would like to say that one of the things that I tried to do in my classroom, not always to great success, but something that I think was well worthwhile, is having your students to go back and talk to parents, to grandparents, to great-grandparents. You know, it used to just be the men. Now, of course, those women can be telling those stories as well. So there's some incredible things that these students can get. And I know that there's so many stories that I wish that I could have gotten. It wasn't until long after the fact that I learned that my mother had 2 first cousins that served in the Pacific. They were both pilots and were both killed during the Battle of Okinawa, just within a few weeks of each other. My great uncle was in the 9th Armored Engineers. Those were the guys that took the Remagen Bridge. Our first steps into Germany came across that, and he was a part of that group. Now, he was alive in my time, and I was able to talk to him, and my memories of those things are incredible. And so I hope you will encourage your students to look into those things and find out that stuff before those people are gone that can tell them those stories. I appreciate you coming to this lesson. I hope that these materials are wonderful and that they can enhance your classroom tremendously. And now I would open this up. If anybody has any questions or discussion, I would love to do that. Thank you very much.